What's up, nerds? Welcome to the booth here for the first time today. Riley Knight, joined by the Hall of Famer Paulo Vida Dama de Rosa. Paulo, great to have your company today, mate. We're going to get stuck into some historic before very much longer. This is a newer format, one of the Magic's newer competitive formats, and we've seen a lot of stuff change since its inception. I'm excited to see how how we go with it throughout the weekend. What are you looking forward to in historic, Paulo?
Well, I mean, it's really a question of whether Omnath can be as good in historic as it is in standard, right? Because we know it's good in standard, but we don't know how good it is in historic yet, right? We already had a big historic tournament, but it didn't include that card, right? It didn't have the new set. So how good is Omnath, and how good are these new decks that emerged, right? The deck that Ken Yukuhiro is playing didn't exist back in the last historic tournament, right? How good is it? That is the biggest question for me coming into this weekend. How much can the new set impact this relatively established format?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen already a huge amount of change since the last historic tournament where Goblins was public enemy number one, but was taken out very handily by Jund Sacrifice. These days, of course, Omnath, all the jackals in the chat ready to get their teeth into this new format of Mythic. But in historic, yes, as you say, Paolo, its place has not yet been fully determined, and that's one of the big questions that we're going to answer this weekend. We know it's good in standard. How good is it in historic? Certainly not as ubiquitous in this older or more sort of more eternal-ish format on Arena. So again, plenty of questions for us to answer this weekend, Paolo.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, not only is there the uniform deck that is quite new, but there are also some different flavors of Azorius and Ban, which were decks that did not do very well at the Invitational, but now they have a different enemy, right? Because when you change, who enemy number one is, it went from Goblins to now arguably Omnath and Jund Sacrifice. You also change which decks are good, right? So these decks weren't good before, but are they good now? That is another question that we have. Does the metagame changing mean that blue-white is suddenly the best deck, right? It could be.
Well, look, in historic at the moment, we've got full-on aggro decks, we've got control decks, mid-range decks, we've even got an actual factual combo deck in this Neostorm deck as well. But I have to ask you very quickly, Paulo, if you were playing in this event, what would you have brought to the historic portion of the tournament?
So I would have brought the Omnath deck, I think, because, well, it is the safest deck. I think it's very good. It's very powerful versus what I would expect the field to be. I would expect a lot of Jund Sacrifice, for example. I think that is a good matchup for the Omnath decks, and some Sultai. That is also a good matchup, depending on how they play. But after looking, so that's what I would have submitted as a player. But after looking at the field, I would wish I had submitted the Neoform deck, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that is the one deck in the format that actually just has a good matchup versus Omnath. And that is the most prevalent deck in the field, right? So I think Ken Yukuhiro's choice here, very inspired. Even though obviously it's not a walk in the park, right? That deck does have to go through a bunch of different things. For example, people are splashing for Yasharn, right? Which is a hate card that happens to hit your combo as well. The blue-white decks that have Graph Digger's Cage in the main deck, you have to deal with that too. So it's not like everyone is unprepared. But I think that deck is honestly where I wish I would be if I was playing this tournament.
Well, we're going to see how that deck goes right now. It looks like our players are ready down in our virtual feature match area here. Of course, Brad Nelson, Ken Yukuhiro, two modern titans of the game. They're ready to get stuck in. And I tell you what, I'm very ready as well. So let's get to it here and see how these two go. Brad Nelson on Jund Sacrifice. This is a deck that's been around for quite a while in historic, of course. I'm sure many people watching are familiar with it. Looking to really an upgraded version of the old standard deck that played, Witches Oven, Cauldron, familiar, that sort of thing, all the way up to Corvold. Also getting a huge shot in the arm from that card you see on the right of your screen, Collected Company. But I think it's Ken Yukuhiro who once again is going to steal the show here with this brand new, very exciting piece of technology, this Neostorm deck, and opening it up straight away with a Valakut Awakening here, the reverse side of that there. And again, showing that the Zendikar really is having a big impact on this historic format.
Yeah, and Brett's deck is a deck that we have seen in Standard, but is a little bit different now, right? Because I think this historic version is capable of much more aggressive draws, right? If you're playing versus a deck in Standard in the previous format, it was just a grindy deck, right? You knew that you had your time to set up, and this is not necessarily the case here with Brett's version, right? So even though I think Brett is not favored because he doesn't have Disruption to stop Ken's combo, he's not going to give Ken all the time in the world, right? We see cards like Dreadhorde Butcher, Collected Company. These cards can apply a lot of pressure, which is not common from this, cat Oven archetype, right? It's not a trail deck. It's an aggressive deck that has these combos.
Yeah, this one certainly is more aggressively slanted. And for those of you who, perhaps haven't played against many combo decks, we tend to see combo decks in older form. When I say older formats, I mean formats that have access to a greater card pool. It's rare to see it in standard. pure combo. But the two ingredients you need when facing off against combo decks, you need pressure and you need disruption. And one of those often isn't enough. You can't just have the disruption, no pressure to back it up, because they'll just wait for the perfect moment to go off. And you can't just have the pressure without disruption, because often you see their cards, they have interactive cards like Ether Gust can often take the pressure down to the point that they can recover enough to go off. So here, there's definitely some amount of the pressure from Nelson. We're seeing a Cauldron Familiar, we're seeing a Dreadhorde Butcher. This is going to put some pressure on. But there is that lack of disruption. Claim the Firstborn, Collected Company, these are good cards, but they're not what you want in basically a pure combo-based matchup here.
Yeah, I mean, they don't stop your opponent from doing what they're trying to do, right? And this is a matchup where if Yukuhiro gets to do his thing, he's going to win. Red cannot stop him from doing it. So the big question is, can Yukuhiro find his pieces, right? Because this Yukuhiro's deck, it's not a hybrid combo deck like the ones we've seen before, right? It's not a Splinter Twin kind of deck where you can just grind your opponent with Snapcaster Mages and just play some creatures and they maybe win that way. It really only wins by comboing, right? So it has a lot of digging, but if you're ever in a spot where, say, your 4 Neoforms are in the bottom 15 cards of your deck, you're not going to win the game. You do not have a plan B. You're all in on your plan A, and usually that's going to be good enough, right? But not always. For example, this game, Kent just doesn't have it going yet, but the moment he draws Neoform, he's going to win the game on the spot.
And something I want to talk about with this Neoform deck, I mean, we haven't seen a huge amount of it because it is a relatively fresh face in this historic format. But, I've been watching people stream. My brain is far too smooth. My brain is a perfectly spherical bowling ball, and I'm not going to be able to play a deck like this for love nor money. But I've been watching people like MJ play this on stream. I've been watching some people much smarter than me getting across this list. And I'm staggered by its consistency, because especially in formats where you don't have cards like Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm, whatever else, legacy staples like this, it's much harder to put together a combo when you're just hoping the top of your deck is going to be kind to you. But with cards like Opt, Anticipate, there are lots of ways for this deck to dig through its library. We call this velocity, and you're seeing it right here with Valakut Awakening, digging through cards, trying to find the necessary ingredients. Still no luck, though, here.
Yeah, I mean, the deck is basically, it has some combo pieces, right? And then it has some cards that it needs to play to be able to win the game, like the Comet Cybrand that we've seen, the Tuk Rebel Ford. But these are few and far between, and everything else just draws an extra card or is card selection in some way, right? So you do have to run pretty bad to never see your combo if you're given enough time.
It ends up, if the bottom 4 cards of your library are the Neoforms, then you're going to have a bad time. But here, one card that has really impressed me in many matchups here is Wall of Blossoms. It looks so, that's a stinker of a Collected Company. The Collected Company count really opening up in a very unfortunate way here. Wall of Blossoms as a 0/4 that draws a card, and it's perfect in this situation here. Look at this. It's going to gain a lot of life. Were it not for this this Claim the Firstborn, that Wall of Blossoms would just sit there and soak up damage as the day is long.
Yeah, and Wall of Blossom is really a card that plays several different roles in this deck, right? First, it draws a card, so it digs through your combo pieces. It blocks, so it buys you more time to dig through the combo pieces. It's a creature you can copy with your Glasspool Mimic, right? So it's another element there. But most importantly, it's a 2-mana creature that you can sacrifice to get your combo going, right? Because removal doesn't stop your combo once it gets going, but your opponent can stop it if the only creature you have is the Seagate Oracle, right? The 2/1.
Yeah. Sorry, the Seagate Stormcaller, yeah.
Yes, sorry, Seagate Stormcaller. So they just put a ability on a stack, they kill it, and then you have the Neoform, but you have nothing to sacrifice. And having the Wall of Blossoms means that you were always going to have something to sacrifice to get your chain going. So even if that Stormcaller dies, you can still kickstart your combo.
And it's been interesting to watch this list evolve. We've seen Tangled Florahedron, the modal double face card from Zendikar, as one of the 2-drops. We saw Paradise Druid as well. Paradise Druid is a really important one because it is hexproof and offers obviously the extra mana as well. But I like Wall of Blossoms. I like the fact that it blocks. I like the fact that it can soak up some damage, and of course it does offer that velocity. So it's interesting. Here's something to think about throughout this weekend, Paulo. I don't think we've seen the best version of this deck. We've had a couple of players turn up with this Neostorm deck, and I don't think any of them have the final form, the full 1.0 release. I think this deck is still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think the versions are radically different too, right?
Yeah.
We see Michael Jacob playing Sphinx of Foresight, and I believe Junya
Yes.
Naga is playing Fae of Wishes,
Mm.
even though he tested with Ken Yukuhiro, right? So they tested together, and I don't think they're playing the same version.
And that speaks to the fact that this deck just isn't finished, and I'm sure we'll see it develop here. Pact of Negation taking care of that Witch's Oven. I like that Pact taking out one of the key... It looks innocuous, but it is one of the key cards in this matchup. And look at these Walls of Blossom. Look at that. 6 damage saved. Yukuhiro down to 5. He'd be in big trouble without them. And the question now is that Dualcaster Mage. I mean, you don't really want to play it as a Grey Ogre, but, you know, is this the point at which you have to just start battening down the hatches? You're not going to have a full turn next turn. You do have to pay for that pack, don't forget. So is this just the time to play a, you know, a pretty bad-looking 3-mana 2/2? It looks like it is for Ken here. What do you think of that, Paolo?
I mean, you do what you have to, right? Obviously, Ken would prefer to use that to copy something, whether it's something that he cast or Brad cast, right? If Brad casts a collected company, he just play it and copy it, right? So it does have that ability. But now he's under pressure, and yeah, he just has to do something. And I'm just gonna correct myself. Junya and Ken are actually playing the same version. It's MJ that has the
MJ that
and
has
the Fae of Wishes.
Yeah.
So, but still a lot of different possibilities that you can play with the deck, right? I really do not think we've seen the best version of this deck yet. No.
And there's something that I'm really hoping for this tournament. I'm really, really hoping that at one point we get the two of the three Neoform players playing against each other in the feature match area. But I have a sort of like sub hope for that it's not me casting it, because I've got no idea. I don't know how that would work. Because don't forget, everyone, you can use your Dualcaster Mage to copy your opponent's Neoform and go off in response to them going off, and then you've both got exactly the same board state, exactly the same number of 3/3s, and I don't know how to get out of that one. I mean, I guess at that point you just go and Fail Wishes attack you in the air for 1. I got no idea. So I hope Marshall gets to look after that one, Paolo, because I'm not up to the job.
Yeah, and here we had an interesting play where Ken chose to not block the Cauldron Familiar, right? Ken just took 1 damage for free. He could have blocked it with the Dualcaster Mage because he didn't want to grieve Brad a card, right? Because Brad does have that Midnight Reaper. So he's like, yeah, you're not going to burn me down from 5, right? From 4. So I would rather you just don't draw an extra card and get another threat going. And there is the Combat Celebrant.
Okay, Combat Celebrant. So this isn't allowing an attack for... Yeah, not much. Another Midnight Reaper here. So if this Cauldron Familiar ever dies, Brad is going to take a licking, but he's going to draw a bunch of cards. He's in a very commanding position. And, you know, we talked a little bit about what this deck looks like when it whiffs, and we're seeing that here. You know, there are plenty of blocks that Yukuhiro can make, but the problem with the blocks that he's making here, again, he takes 1 from the Cauldron Familiar, is that any creatures that die draw Brad cards. And that's just not something that Yukuhiro is interested in happening here.
Yeah, and here that was actually quite dangerous because putting himself on 3, Brad is actually dead if that Dreadheart Butcher ever dies. Sorry, Ken is dead if the Dreadheart Butcher ever dies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so if Brad at any point finds a way to sacrifice a creature, he wins the game. But Ken probably thought, well, my opponent has 2 Midnight Reapers in play already. If they find a way to sacrifice a creature, they're probably just going to draw enough stuff to kill me.
If it's not the 3 damage, it'll probably be the 3 cards. But here is Neoform and Seagate Stormcaller. So right at the death here, are we going to see Ken just start to go off? What's going to happen here, Paolo?
Yeah, so Ken is going to sacrifice a 2-drop, and then that's going to be he's going to get the extra copy of the Neoform, which will resolve first. That's going to get a Dualcaster.
Oh wow! Oh wow! He's just gone off at more or less the absolute last minute he could on 3 life, facing a lethal Dreadhorde Butcher if he were to ever sacrifice. Could be sacrificed 3 Midnight Reapers as well as a source of card advantage. Cauldron Familiar, and now this Dualcaster Mage combo is going off with Neoform, going and getting Shapeshifters to turn these Dualcaster Mage or turn into Dualcaster Mages to keep the chain going. And there finally is the 13th draft pick All-Star in the form of Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort and an Uro just for good measure, buff that life total up a little bit. And now, of course, everything has haste, and this is going to enable an enormous attack.
Yeah, and that's just going to be the game for Ken Yukuhiro, right? And it is funny how these things go, like, oh, he drew it in the last possible second, you know? But he played the whole game for that, right? He's been trying to draw that card for, 8 turns. And finally he drew it in the last possible moment, but he was expected to at that point, I think.
hits for exacties there as well. I mean, did have that combat celebrant for an extra combat step if needed, but no need. And Brad Nelson goes down after really being just so close to taking out that game. And you can see at lightning pace, these players sideboarding. A little tricky to follow what's going on there with Ken Yukuhiro making some choices. You can see that at
Yeah,
least one copy of combat celebrant
the
has come
Japanese
out.
names in the deck list make it hard to see what he's siding out.
A little bit tricky, yes, indeed. But you can see at least one combat celebrant has come out. Not interested in too many copies of Pact and Negation post board as well. And unsurprising, Paolo, to see Claim the Firstborn hitting the sideboard straight away for Nelson. That card is a real stinker in this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely awful. And Brett has cards in his deck that he didn't want to have, right? I don't think like Midnight Reaper is very good, for example. You'd prefer not having that, right? Sometimes Priest of Forgotten Gods isn't very good either. Even Cauldron Familiar, but he just doesn't have anything else to bring, right? So it is unfortunate that his deck is not super ready for that matchup.
No, and I think this is another edge that decks like the Neostorm lists can enjoy in situations like this. If you bring a deck that, maybe people know about, but maybe they're not prepared for exactly. It always reminds me of, when Reanimator was big in Standard, and then people would pack their Rest in Peace and whatever else. And then people would stop playing Reanimator because, everyone had Rest in Peace in the sideboard, so people would start taking out Rest in Peace in the sideboard. And if you're one of those first people on the bleeding edge of like bringing Reanimator back, you would just pick up free wins because people weren't prepared. And if Neostorm makes it big, I'm pretty sure it's a deck that can be hated out, right? But in this tournament, particularly where everyone's gunning for Omnath, players like Yukuhiro, players like MJ, they're going to pick up percentage points just because Brad Nelson didn't devote, 4 to 7 sideboard slots to beat this combo deck.
Yeah, in case of Brad, I would argue he's not going after Omnath either, right? Is this a replay for the first game? Brad's hand looks incredibly similar.
It's got a Phyrexian Tower this time around, but yes, that did look very, very similar. Let's see where he goes for a nice aggressive opening here with the Cauldron Familiar into the Dreadhorde Butcher. And Yukuhiro with his hand. Look at this, Nightpack Ambusher coming in. What's the reason behind this card? This seems like an interesting card to have brought in this spot.
I think this is a card that is more, it's not even, this card is very good in this matchup. It's more like the cards that I have in my sideboard just really aren't good in this matchup, right? Like you really don't want Mystical Dispute. You really don't want Pact and Negation and cards like that. So yeah, you might as well have your 4/4 that blocks and makes some tokens and will stall out the game. And sometimes we will even win you the game. Right, I don't think this is Yukuhiro changing his plan and becoming, an aggro control deck, which is possible, though very hard in that list because he commits a lot of slots. But I don't think this is that. I think this is just, I had 58 or 59 cards that I want to play, and I have to bring in 2 more, so it might as well be this 4/4 that blocks.
Man, look at this Wall of Blossoms. Look at this Wall of Blossoms. I'm absolutely just loving this here. It's soaking up a bunch of damage. Dreadhorde Butcher is actually going to eat it now to get rid of the Wall of Blossoms there, being sacrificed to the tower. Oh, rest in pepperonis, Brad Nelson. This poor bloke. The absolute stone cold whiff on the collected company. You hate to see it.
Why did you say rest in pepperonis?
Oh, mate. I mean, he's going to be buried in more than that. This poor. I mean, you can't come back from that. You can never come back from that. How do you, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he quits Magic and goes and plays, competitive Connect 4 for the rest of his life after that.
Yeah, I mean that does happen, right? It is unfortunate, but
he is 1 from 12 on his collected companies. He got one card.
Can he go 1 for 18?
1 for 18 for Paulo Brad Nelson. Oh, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. Here's a Valakut Awakening. Look at this. Yukuhiro wheeling away a bunch of his cards. Going to find some new ones as well. Try to fix up that hand. This is looking much more like a slower, mid-rangier build of this Neostorm deck, this draw that he's had here. But I think, okay, this is better. This is better stuff now. Nelson is back on track with his collected companies. That's a nice couple of hits there, the Devil and the Strider there, PV.
Yeah, and here we're in a spot where, Brad now has the ability to disrupt the combo, right? If you hadn't hit these cards, Yukuhiro could just go Seagate Stormcaller into Neoform and the game's over. And now Brad actually has the ability to sacrifice the token to kill the Stormcaller and stop the combo from happening. So it demands more from Yukuhiro because that Wild of Blossoms died, right?
So here's my question, Polo. If people are just getting into historic and they're going to come across this ladder, this deck on the ladder, what's some of the piece of advice that you'd give to them? You know, is it stuff like don't tap out? Is it hold a removal spell? Are you wanting to counter the Neoform? What's just some general advice against this new Neostorm deck? Because I know a lot of people will be wanting to learn more about it.
Well, I think the best way to beat it is to have proactive forms of hate that you can just play, and then they stay in play. Like Grafdigger's Cage, for example. They cannot win through Grafdigger's Cage, right? They have to remove it. So just getting that in play is your best bet to win against it. Past that, I really think you need to interact with the spells more than with the combo part, right? If you want to interact with the creatures, it's ideal to discard them before, right? Like Thoughtseize, for example, is a good card versus it. Removal spells don't work that much unless your opponent's board is empty, right? If their battlefield's empty, then the removal spells can work to stop the combo for one turn. But really, just go for pressure. I would say is your best bet.
Here's a Thoughtseize now, and a Nightpack Ambusher in response. So this can pick out that Ura, that Opt, or indeed that Dualcaster Mage. So you get Stormcaller, also an option hiding out there in the hand. And we'll see what Nelson wants to take here. This is a tough pick because Yukuhiro is kind of taking a different direction with this Ambusher. And so, you know, if you go after the combo piece, for example, you might just die to that Uro. So an interesting spot here for Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really stop the Uro, right? Because if you take it, it can still come back whenever it would come back. So I think that is the one card you're definitely not taking. I think taking the Sea Storm card makes sense. Right, it is the combo piece. Currently, you can stop it, but now it would be interesting to see what Brad will actually attack with. Because obviously, Yukuhiro can block, but Brad can use a creature to finish off the Nightpack Ambusher.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that here. You can see the attack with the Mayhem Devil. I mean, you're kind of losing what is quote-unquote usually your best creature. Mayhem Devil perhaps not at its best in this matchup, but the fact that it can trade effectively 1-for-1 with the Ambusher is certainly allowing Nelson to continue to keep up the pressure. And I'm not surprised if he keeps this Butcher on top. I mean, that is just more pressure, right?
Yeah, and it is another way to kill something at instant speed, right? Because right now, the way the game was before this attack, Brad could not lose next turn, right? Now he actually can if Yukuhiro hits a sequence of top decks because he has that Opt and he needs to draw the Stormcaller and the Neoform, right? But he has 2 draw steps for that. So he could actually win the game now that this Mayhem Devil is gone. But it would require, you know, a lot of luck. But
yeah, and not a Valakut Awakening off the top here. Yukuhiro is certainly under the gun, and this is what we talked about when it you know, in game number 1. We were talking about the combination of pressure plus disruption. And this Jund deck isn't the most aggressive deck that's out there, but it at the moment has sufficient pressure plus that Thoughtseize in the form of disruption, and that's how you beat a combo deck. Yukuhiro now reeling a little bit. He is kind of on the ropes. He needs to find the good stuff, and I tell you what, he's just not finding it.
Yeah, he's not, and now he's probably going to play Uro Game for Life, but what he's really looking for is Anger of the Gods, which I imagine he's avoided it, right? It seems like it is for that matchup that it's there. And if he draws that, which I guess that's not what he drew. He drew the Dualcaster Mage, I think.
No, that might be an Anger of the Gods, actually.
It is Anger.
I think he's just killed it, yeah.
That will reset the clock, right, and give him a lot more time, as well as removing Brad's form of disruption, because Brad has disruption in the form of creatures, right? And then if Brad doesn't have any creatures in play, Yukuhiro can just go off.
So this Anger of the Gods does stand to change the game a little bit here. It's not going to be as impactful as it would be in certain other matchups, especially given that Woe Strider. But here, I mean, we can get a crisp, clean attack in, coming across for at least 5. And they come.
Yeah, and it can be 9 when all is said and done, right? Because the Priest will do 2, and the Redheart Butcher will do 2 more.
Yes.
So Yukuhiro is basically at 1 life right now.
This is something we're going to have to keep a close eye on here.
Yeah, and Brett could just sacrifice use a Priest right now, and if he draws Cauldron Familiar, he wins the game. Right? If he draws Witch's Oven,
Witch's Oven will also do it, yeah, because he can bring back that Cauldron Familiar by sacrificing it. Yeah, Yukuhiro is tap dancing on an avalanche here, and he may soon be swept up under it. Even with that, his draw has not been great. From what I've seen of the Neostorm deck, this is a bit of an outlier. This is a bit of a a stinker of a draw here. We're going to see we're going to see the priest activation right here and right now. I like this. Nelson taking the chance to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, I think if you've never seen Historic before and you just come up to this game and you see this Neoform deck, you're not going to be impressed. You're not going to rush to build it and think you're going to crush all your Historic tournaments, because it's showing at this point was not the best. Now here, Brad made an interesting play. Because the way things are now, he gave up his ability to stop the combo, right? Because he tapped the priest, and he also got rid of the Dreadheart Butcher, which he could sacrifice. So he can't stop the combo if Yukuhiro just has it. But in return, he does get a 5/4 in play.
Yes.
Which does survive the Anger of the Gods. So we might see Yukuhiro just have to play the Dual Caster Mage here to copy the Anger of the Gods, right? To get two uses of that ability to actually reset the board.
The classic play of flashing in a creature in response to your own sweeper. Yes, very powerful indeed. No, it looks like we're going to go with Uro instead here. And this actually allows the Anger to be played afterwards. Okay, that's not too bad.
No, he gives him Uro, and in return for letting Brett keep a Will Strider, right? Brett is going to scry 3 times right now, so Brett could just find an answer to the Uro, and then the game will be over because Ken will be on 2 life, right? That would just be an attack. But I don't know how many answers to Uro, clean answers, are actually even in Brett's deck at this point.
No,
right?
especially
there's
now
probably
that
no Claim the Firstborn in it.
No, we saw the Claim the Firstborn come out. That's what I was going to say, especially now with Claim the Firstborn in the sideboard. There's no guarantee that Nelson is actually sitting on anything that can deal with the 6/6 here. So Yukuhiro, considering this breeding pool, if he puts it into play untapped, he can then play the Anger. And I think that really is kind of where he's at right now. Otherwise, he's going to have it untapped. I guess with that Abrade off the top, he feels secure in the knowledge that he will be able to make it through the next turn by killing the priest. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that is definitely a reasonable solution. And it does mean the Anger is in his hand, and it's a better card to have in your hand than the Abrade, I think, overall. Right? Because we might see Brad just sacrifice his creatures anyway here to try and find something, because the way Yukuhiro played is really setting himself up to win the game.
Yes.
Right?
Because
Uro is a card that
wins.
Yeah, but Brad does have the Midnight Reaper, so he could wait a while. I don't know what he's drawing into exactly. Obviously, any way of removing that Uro is the game on the spot, right?
Of course, yeah. But how many ways there are left in his deck remains to be seen. Considering sacrificing this goat, I think that what's going through his head now is whether he waits to play that Midnight Reaper before he starts sacrificing stuff to Woe Strider. The Cauldron Familiar is going to survive. Here's a Kitesail Freebooter. Well, that's going to change enormously here.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see Brad just play that Midnight Reaper and maybe sack the cat immediately.
Just to draw a card?
Yeah, because now he gets to scry and draw a card. Well,
yeah, sure.
That order, but...
So draws a card and then scries, finds a Witch's Oven. Okay, well there's that combo. That's a little combo assembled for Nelson here with the Witch's Oven and the Cauldron Familiar. He now casts the Kitesail Freebooter. That's going to take out almost certainly the Anger of the Gods. Otherwise, the Valakut Awakening the only other target for that.
Yeah, and if he takes the Valakut Awakening, the Anger will just kill the Freebooter and bring it back. So
what we typically see with cards like this, Brain Maggot, other cards that attack the hand in this way that are staple to creatures, Tidehollow Sculler, you usually take the removal spell, because if you don't take the removal spell, they'll just use the removal spell to kill your creature and then get back whatever you took instead.
Yeah, and here we see Ken Yukuhiro, his deck really just didn't do anything.
No,
right?
Really,
but
really
he's still very much in this game and arguably ahead, because he just has Uro and a bunch of removal spells, right? And Brad kind of, fizzled on that Collected Company.
Yep.
Obviously, Yukuhiro was at 4, right? If that company had hit just a 2/2, the game would be over already.
Another land off the top here for that Wall of Blossoms, and you can see double Dual Caster Mage and a Valakut Awakening in hand. And now we're going to send in the Uro. Yes, indeed. Get in there with the 6/6, gain 3, draw a card, and then it's another land.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, Yukuhiro can just play the Valakut Awakening and copy it with the Dual Caster Mage. So he's going to add a creature to his battlefield and draw a bunch of cards, right? So Brad is not in a good spot here.
No, it doesn't
If
look
we
like
had
it.
the advantage bar, I'd be putting it over to Yukuhiro at this point.
And I guess this is one of the things that we're learning about this Neostorm deck is that it is quite scrappy. My experience with the deck, which is admittedly limited, I've only watched other people play it, has been pretty straightforward. It's like, yep, I've got it, or no, I don't pack it up. But here, it's in the hands of Yukuhiro. He's really digging. He's really digging the heels in and scrapping hard. It's good to see that this combo deck has a little bit of resilience to it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is highly unusual, right? I think this speaks more about Brad's deck and draw than it does about Yukuhiro's deck. Obviously, Yukuhiro's deck does have the ability to do that, right? He's playing Uro, which not everyone plays in this list, so he gave himself the chance for this to happen. But it was more just that Brad didn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, Brad was able to leverage a little bit of pressure, a little bit of disruption, but at the end of the day, like nothing where Yuki. I mean, I described him before as being on the ropes, and maybe that's true, but it certainly wasn't ever at the point where it's like, oh wow, he is really going down swinging here. It's just he was definitely on the back foot. He was feeling the pressure. But he's rallied marvelously. And now sitting behind this Uro Wall of Blossoms, nice little defensive 0-4 there. And we're going to see a dual caster mage, just a flash grey ogre as well here to potentially trade with the Midnight Reaper. I guess the only thing here is that this does draw Nelson a card. And I don't know, but this Uro is just threatening to completely dominate the battlefield here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit surprising to me to not see the Valkyrie Awakening here, but...
Okay, well, dual caster mage. No, we're not. We're actually not going to give Nelson a card. The dual caster mage on the old Chumperinos here.
Yeah, and Nelson can get the card, right? Because we know he has Witches of it, which you doesn't know. But
so Witches Oven's going to basically cycle itself as we see another Woe Strider here.
Yeah, and the Wolf Strider, right? So once you have two Wolf Striders, you can sack one to the other anyway. So at this point, Nelson can get rid of any amount of his creatures that he wants.
And now we see the Valakut Awakening. It's going to cycle away that land and the dual caster mage. Okay, draw a couple of freshies here. Ooh.
Oh, I guess that is part of the resolution. So it doesn't really work if you copy it. It's not like most traditional.
Oh,
it's not part of the cost.
Yes.
So it's not like Cathartic Reunion. That's why he didn't copy it. That makes more sense.
You can't copy the Valakut away. I mean, you can copy it. It's just that you it's not as if you can turn it into a Cathartic Reunion where you discard 2 and draw 6. It doesn't work like that. Here's a Glasspool Mimic now. This is one of the latest clone type effects. And as you pointed out before, Paolo, it can come down and copy that Wall of Blossoms and another Night Pack Ambusher off the top. So Yukuhiro is really going from strength to strength. He's going to get in with his hero. I imagine we'll see a chump and a sack. Of course,
yeah, I wonder.
Can't afford to take this damage.
I wonder if Yukuhiro actually sideboarded out his combo. Right, I wouldn't think he would because he's playing against a deck with not that much disruption. But it is possible he just turned his deck into one, Anger of the Gods, a Braid, Uro, Night Pack Ambusher deck.
Bad team of mid range, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so the token chump blocks, and then of course is traded in for a food token. Looks like roast goat is back on the menu, boys, and the Uro fails to get across, but still does draw that Anger of the Gods, and that's a very, very tidy little anger here, getting rid of most of the opposing board. That 5/4 Woe Strider will stick around, but the thing is, because again of these double Woe Striders here, Nelson is going to be able to cash in a little bit, right? In response to this anger, he can start sacrificing stuff and make sure that the Midnight Reaper gives him cards. The only problem now is he's on 6 life.
Yeah, he's definitely in trouble here. What is he really drawing towards, right? The pressure is on him. He has to draw something to get out of this spot. If nothing happens, he's just going to lose. Right? He does have the cat still, so he's a while away from flat out dying to that Uro, but
yeah,
where is he trying to go from here?
And this is what we were talking about before when it comes to how you're playing. Are you playing to win or are you playing to not lose? And right now it does feel like Nelson's kind of transitioning towards playing to not lose because he does need to start relying on that cat food Witch's Oven combo in order to prevent the Uro from getting across. But I mean, that suits Yukuhiro just fine and dandy because it's going to give him the opportunity to flesh out his hand, sculpt a game plan that's going to suit him based on what he draws, whether that is comboing off or just winning with an eventual Night Pack Ambusher. So I think definitely the momentum, the wind at the moment in Yukuhiro's sails here, Paulo.
Yeah, I mean, Brett could definitely swing it. You know, he could draw Collective Company and hit Mayhem Devil, or even just draw the Mayhem Devil, and then have a lot more play going, right? Because right now, Brett is doing a lot of things, but is not accomplishing anything, right? He's just throwing balls in the air and getting them back in the same spot. But if he does find the Mayhem Devil, then he's actually accomplishing something. So that is probably what he is trying to find here, or something that could just win the game outright, like a Corvold. Right, then if you drop a Corvold, then well, he stalls the game for a turn and then attacks and wins, right, or potentially wins.
So Nelson here taking his time. He's going to burn that rope a little bit now as he considers his next move. Looks like we're going to see. Are we going to see Woestrider come back from beyond the grave once again? I mean, he knows that there's an Anger of the Gods in the opponent's hand. He knows that Yukuhiro is sitting on another sweeper here, so he doesn't want to play into that.
Yeah, he has to be a little bit careful here.
He's going to be able to power out a priest as well, thanks to that Phyrexian tower.
Yeah, it still does have the Quadrant Familiar in the graveyard, right? So knows that he can just bring it back to block at any point. Decides not to attack with the Woestrider, which is pretty interesting. Maybe wants to, double block the Aurora if that attacks. I don't know how many cards are in Yukuhiro's.
Well, don't forget that Yukuhiro has cast at least one Valakut's Awakening and has Unearthed Hero at least once, but, you'd have to think that if there aren't 5 cards in the bin, it's close to it. So it's not ideal to want to trade with that Uro. Maybe chumping it is just going to be better, but it's a non-stop stream of card advantage here. As we see another Wall of Blossoms, so the shield wall really, really going up here for Yukuhiro.
Yeah, you still have to think that if the Woestrider didn't attack, that is probably because it's gonna block, right? If Brad was just gonna chump with the Quadrant Familiar, he would probably have attacked. So I have to imagine he wants to double block here. But yeah, it's funny that when these two players were paired, obviously they're both very, very well-known players with a lot of very good results, but they're radically different in their approaches to deck selection, right?
Oh yeah.
And you see it familiarized here because Brad is the kind of player that will always play the best version of whatever deck he's playing, right? He always has a solid deck. He doesn't like to gamble very much. So it's very rare that you see Brad with an entirely new deck that could be a hit or miss, right? Brad just is going to have a good deck and a good version of it, and he's going to know sideboard plans inside and out. He's not going to surprise you, but he's just overall solid and strong. And Yukuhiro, it's the opposite, right? You're shocked if he's ever playing a deck that anyone else in the room is playing. Right? He top 8 in the tournament with 4 copies of a card. He was the only person in the entire tournament playing. Right? That was a Bone Picker. So he's this person who's always going to play a deck that might be the best deck in the room, or it might be the worst deck in the room, and you really just have to wait for the tournament to start to find out.
His range of acceptable outcomes with decks is a lot wider than Brad's. Brad has characterized himself, he's not a brewer, he's a tuner. He'll take the best deck and he'll make it even better. Whereas Yukuhiro, he will play the wildest brews, and he's been rewarded for it more often than not. Of course, one of the most well-loved and well-respected players on the competitive circuit. I mean, as indeed is Nelson, but you make a great point that they just come from completely opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, we got the chance to chat to Yukuhiro about, his perspectives and his thoughts heading into this tournament. And, when asked about his gameplay style, his reply was, "I always go into a tournament with a deck that no one uses." And I just love that. I mean, it's almost like changing the difficulty setting, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I'd love to play this. Oh, too many people playing Neostorm. I can't play it anymore. I guess I'll play a mono green intro deck because no one's going to be playing that,
Yeah, that's right. And the things he does really are crazy, right? If you look at his deck in one of his previous online tournaments, he was playing Rotting Regisaur as per aggro. It's like, well, how did this card even come together? How do you put Rotting Regisaur and Teferi and counter spells and Swing for in the same deck?
Ken, how did you get there, mate? Like, what sliding doors moments had to happen for you to get to that point here? In come the Woestriders, they both get blocked by these 0/4 walls of Blossom.
Yeah, and here, I mean, Yukuhiro is just mounting an offense, right? He's gonna, I actually cannot play the Ambusher here. He can't play a Dualcaster Mage if he needs to for some reason, but he does have the winning combo in his hand at this point, right? So assuming Brad has nothing, he's just going to win the game.
Let's see what Nelson's move is here. He's got that Priest of Forgotten Gods.
I don't believe Brad has something that will get him out of here. Because he can, like, now Yukuhiro is attacked so many times with that Uru, he's just way out of burn range.
Yeah.
So something like, a Priest activation and a Dreadhorde Butcher going to the graveyard is just not going to do it. I think Brad needs something more here.
So let's see what
I think
Yukuhiro
he's just
does.
going to lose this turn.
Like, Yukuhiro can just attempt to go for the combo here. He's got the Stormcaller, the Seagate Stormcaller. He's got the Neoform as well.
Yeah, the only question is, can Brad do something to stop that, right? And I think, I don't think he should be able to.
No, I mean, you can bring back a Cauldron Familiar in response. It gives you one more blocker. But apart from that, there's only Witch's Oven, Cauldron Familiar. That Dreadhorde Butcher is on the bench. Priest of Forgotten Gods activation as well, but you've got Sacrifice Fodder for it. So Yukuhiro here going through the thought process is going to kick things off with an Anger of the Gods. And this is going to force the action here for Nelson. Does he want to activate this Priest in response? Otherwise, he's going to lose it.
Yeah, I mean, he might just have to, but also at the same time, is he just dead to an attack here? Right, because Yukuhiro does have the Afraid. No, he's going to have 2 tokens, so he'll be fine. Sorry, two food tokens. Yeah, so he can bring back the cat twice.
The Cauldron Familiar just sitting there in the wings, waiting to leap in at instant speed to block, means that it's probably unlikely that the Euro can get across here. But let's find out. Woestride are going to sacrifice the Midnight Reaper here, you would have thought. Yep, draw another card. Down to 2, but the difference between 3 and 2, not huge here for Nelson. Oh, well, I guess when you draw a Thoughtseize, I guess it actually is. So I'm just immediately correcting you
immediately.
Yep. Just immediately. I just got well actually'd by the MTGA Shuffler. So thanks for that.
There is the Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven, right? So Nelson can gain some life if he needs to do that, but now he has to stop the combo somehow, and I don't really think he can. Like, obviously we're looking at his hand and we know he can't.
Yes.
But I think even if you didn't know his hand, I don't think the tools are in his deck to stop it, unless somehow Yukuhiro just brought a bunch of. Unless somehow Brad brought a bunch of Ratcat Mailings.
And that's enough. We're not even going to see Yukuhiro go off here as Seagate Stormcaller plus Neoform takes the game and the match. It was a careful study there from Ken Yukuhiro, who really had to take his time and assemble the combo over a number of turns. We don't often see it go that long, people. It was quite something from the Neostorm player there.
Yeah, this was definitely the result I expected, but not in the way that I expected, right? I expected it to be just a clean win for Yukuhiro, who assembled his combo and just wins on the spot. Brad can't do anything. Instead, Brad put up a very strong fight because Ken Yukuhiro just didn't do very much in the early game in both these games, but unfortunately it wasn't enough, and Ken found his combo at both times.
Well, I imagine we'll be seeing more Neostorm in the near future, my friends, so plenty more to look forward to, and plenty more to look forward to on the other side of this break. We're going to be out of here for just a couple of minutes. We'll be back with more live magic coming your way after this.
Drink a little water, feel a little better. You do what you gotta, babe. Breathe a little air. Bring life into your muscles, instinct for a living man. Oh, but there is one thing you're all forgetting. That endless morning will turn to night. And when you're dreaming, you will be seeing a little demon dancing around. Baby, there is only one way, and that's the slow decay. Get a little earthy with me, I'll pull you down. Your brain's so tired, I can tell from
My name is Luis Scott Vargas. I'm 37 and I'm from the USA.
My name is Luis Salvato. I'm 31 years old and I'm from Argentina.
Coverage of the 2020 season grand finals continues here. Riley Knight joined by the Hall of Famer Palavita Damadorose. We've got another Hall of Fame we're going to check in with here. Fan favourite Luis Scott Vargas playing against another Luis Salvato. And as you can see here, this is, we've got quite a chromatic matchup here with 4-colour mid-range going up against Omnath Ramp. Now, Omnath, of course, public enemy number 1 in Standard, has been making a name for himself in Historic as well. But talk to us about Luis Scott Vargas' deck here, PV, because it's a chip off the old block here.
Yeah, so Luis Scott Vargas is playing, he's basically playing Seth Manfield's deck from the last tournament, from the Invitational, except that he's also splashing white for Yasharn, right? Which is, I like to call the hate pig in my heart. Andrew Brown corrected me that it was a boar, but it will always be the hate pig to me.
It's its true name, sure.
Yeah, and that is a card that is super strong versus a lot of the field, right? It stops any sacrifice effects. So it against the deck that we just saw Brad playing, it stops almost Brad's entire deck. Right, and against Yukuhiro, it literally stops his entire deck because he cannot cast his Wind Condition. Right, so that is a card that we've seen a lot of in the 4-color Omnath decks. I think there are a lot of teams that are playing that, and this team is actually just splashing for it.
Yes, yeah, and this was something, it was incredible as we see Lotus Cobra come down perfect here for Salvato with the Fabled Passage to follow it up. It was something that when I first saw it, I was like, oh, is that a joke? Like, why they? Because it's just, so Luis Scott Vargas' deck and the entire Channel 5 crew at this event, they're all playing what is basically just Sultai splashing for Yasharn. And when I first saw Yasharn in these lists, I was like, hang on, whoa, what? Like, is that a gag? Are they doing that as a joke? And then I realized, oh, no, I guess it shuts off Jund Sacrifice. Oh, yeah, and I guess it shuts off Neoform. And I guess it shuts off Goblins. And I guess it shuts off Phyrexian Tower. And it's actually just really, really good against a bunch of powerful stuff that's happening in Historic. The fact that it's a 4/4 that draws you 2 cards isn't too bad either, but there are some decks that just cannot win with this on the battlefield, particularly Jund Sacrifice, which was the deck to beat in the last tournament, where they can't even cast Claim the Firstborn on it.
Yeah, and it is the kind of card that you don't realize how many things it actually shuts off until you play against it, right?
Yeah.
So, Godfarrow's Gift. Well, I want to sacrifice my gaze to the afterlife. I cannot do that, right? Wily Goblin, that makes a treasure token. Well, guess what? You cannot sacrifice your treasure token.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it impacts a lot, and that is why these players are playing it.
It really does, and we actually see Yasharn in some of the sideboards of the Omnath decks as well. As a timely Aethergust takes care of this escape to the wild, Salvato has built out quite a board here with a double Lotus Cobra, especially when you consider with what's in hand there, Uro Escape and a Genesis Ultimatum. So now it's really down to Scott Vargas to find a way forward, and Nissa is a great way to do that. I'm sure many people are having flashbacks to Nissa's reign of dominance in Standard, and she's doing it again in Historic here, powering the mana base of this Sultai list. In comes the 3/3, and let's see what the follow-up is. Can plop out an Uro or Extinction Event. Not too bad.
Yeah, and I would say that Nissa, who shakes the world, is the most important card in this matchup for Luis, or I guess for Luis Scott Vargas. They're both actually LSVs.
Yes, yeah, that's the other thing, right?
The LSV mirror. But original LSV is the most important card for him because his deck really does not have the tools to beat Salvato's deck in the long game. Right? Because if we look at what disruption exists in Luis Scott Vargas' deck, it's like, well, it's Aether Gust. Well, then they just recast the card next turn, right? It's Essence Scatter that doesn't deal with Ultimatum or with Escape to the Wilds, which are the most important cards. And then there's Thoughtseize, but at some point they're just going to draw the card again, right?
It doesn't protect you from the top of the deck, yeah.
Exactly. So what Luis Scott Vargas has to do is close out the game in a timely manner, right? These disruption spells, they buy you time. And the Nissa is how you close the game, right? Imagine this game without the Nissa in there. Luis Scott Vargas clears the board, right? He answers all the threats from Salvato for the time being, but he doesn't get anywhere, and Salvato just has more threats. Now Salvato is under pressure, right? Because that Nissa exists. So that is the most important card.
And we've seen in Standard, for a long time before rotation, Nissa into Hydroid Krasis and just how powerful that was. And that's what Scott Vargas is hoping for here. That's a big old Krasis after Nissa. and then the Eliminate to take care of the third Lotus Cobra. And so now Salvato kind of has to find a way forward. Has drawn Omnath, which is one of the best ways to do it. But what's the follow-up after this Omnath? There's no land. You can't trigger it straight away. Oh, there's a land at the top. Okay. And that, I guess, changes things, because if you then go Stomping Ground into an Uro or Stomping Ground into an Explore, you're going to play the Explorer.
And you draw another land here. Unfortunately not.
Unfortunately for Salvato. It does gain a little bit of life all the same, but still this Nissa plus this Krasis and another Krasis in hand. I mean, Scott Vargas in a commanding position, but you can never count out the Omnath player when they've got the 4-4 online, especially with Genesis Ultimatum in hand here. So this game, I mean, this is Battle Cruiser Magic, right? Both players really just going as big as possible here.
Yeah, but when you're going as big as possible, that's the thing. The deck with Genesis Ultimatum is going to win, right? That's the one that's going biggest. For the most part, I mean, this is still pretty big. There's huge Krasises and
we're going to see another massive
Nissa
Krasis.
Yeah, so both players are actually going pretty big, but in this spot, you have to be feeling good about being able to play Genesis Ultimatum.
Hydro Krasis draws a fresh grip. Double Essence Scatter doesn't help against the opposing Genesis Ultimatum, but I'll tell you what helps against the opposing life total. It's a 6/6 Flampler.
Yeah, it is. And also drew the Mythos, so can get rid of the Omnath if it comes to that. So has the choice between playing, hooking up Essence Scatters or the Mythos.
Mythos here, yeah, I think as it goes after the Omnath, this makes sense for a number of reasons. First of all, it really puts a lot of pressure on, right? Like you're putting maximum amount of pressure on Salvato, hoping to get him dead next turn. But also, holding up that Essence Scatter, the only creature you're really worried about countering is an Omnath. And when they've already got an Omnath out, they're not going to play their second one. So here's a Genesis Ultimatum, which you didn't have an answer to anyway. Now you're just kind of at the mercy of the top there. Oh, double Uro at the top. That's going to buff the life total a fair bit here.
Yeah, but it's really not going to be enough.
It's not too bad, right? Like, that's not too bad for Scott Vargas.
Oh, no, I mean, this is great for Scott Vargas because he actually has 100 power in play, right? So
it's just like he's got 4,000 power, and as a result, I mean, even the buffering the life total up to 12 is just not enough here. These players going to hit the sideboard after Luis Scott Vargas picks up a tidy game 1 win.
Yeah, and that was, Luis Scott Vargas was able to apply enough pressure. So we saw that Luis Salvato's hand, it had all the things he needed. Right, but he just didn't have time to cast them, so he was forced to play the ultimatum there as a Hail Mary, and he needed to hit a lot there for that to win him the game, and he didn't.
No, couldn't find a way to clinch it there. So we'll go down to game number 2 and see if Luis Salvato is in a better position to maybe take Luis Scott Vargas to account here. Watching live coverage of the 2020 season grand finals. It's great to have your company. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Riley Knight, joined by the Hall of Famer Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa, the Brazilian superstar. And we've got another South American on your screen in the northern hemisphere here. It's Luis Salvato and Luis Scott Vargas, the American Hall of Famer in the south, down on the bottom there. And this looks like a much more interactive hand for Scott Vargas. He's got Thoughtseize, he's got plenty of counter magic, but that turn 2 Cobra is such a problem for anyone wanting to beat Omnath decks.
Yeah, and Lotus Cobra is a card that obviously we have seen it in Standard, right? It's quite good in this deck. It is even better in Historic because it combos so well with Growth Spiral, Uro, and Explore, right? Because if you have one Lotus Cobra in play, all of these cards are free, right? The moment you play a Growth Spiral, you get to play an extra land, which adds 2 mana, which pays for the Growth Spiral. So you can basically just go off forever, and if you have 2 Lotus Cobras, you're adding mana for each of these spells that you play. So that is really quite strong.
Essence Scatter taking care of that Uro, the first half of it at least. And now an Uro off the top here for Scott Vargas, but he's not going to be able to play it as he's just got an Dathra Triumph. So just holds up the Aether Gust, holds up the Essence Scatter. So he's in a good position here against a potential Omnath.
Yeah, and Essence Scattering an Uro is a play that you don't always see, right? Because Uro, obviously when it's the second part of Uro, that's a play you always want to make. But you don't always see the first part being Essence Scatter. But in this case, it makes a lot of sense because Luis Scott Vargas has a lot of spells to play and not that much mana to play them. So he wants to trade the spells while he can, right? He just doesn't want Luis Salvato to accelerate too much and just run away with the game before he can find his own lands.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially when you consider that Scott Vargas' hand is, as you say, it's stacked. I mean, it's just full of cards that need to be cast. And even if it's not the best target for them, we're seeing exactly this again with an Aether Gust. This isn't maybe where you'd necessarily want to deploy your Aether Gust, but just to use his mana, make sure that he's staying in the game. Can he find a land? He cannot. Oh, that's not good. So Thoughtseize going upstairs, and that's going to take care of this negate.
Yeah,
So the
and
only
here,
option to take there. And after that, just an Essence Scatter. Once again, you got a bit of insurance across from an Omnath off the top.
yeah, and here the Cobra is not only a mana producer, but it also gives you the ability to attack that Narset,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Which is an important card for Luis Vargas. So getting rid of that is pretty good.
Fabled Passage off the top is a good draw here for Scott Vargas, who's going to be able to continue to develop his mana. Playing against Salvato, who is now on a single land in hand. Oh dear, Thoughtseize going to whiff pretty hard there. But that's okay. We've got a Narset to follow it up with here. So Scott Vargas has kind of weathered the storm here, right? His slower, more interactive hand has kind of paid dividends.
Yeah, but now we arrive at the point in the game that I described earlier, right? Well, Luis Vargas answered everything that Luis Salvato is doing, but he has no pressure, right? So at some point, Luis Salvato can just top deck one of his big cards, and that will win him the game. Luis Vargas is drawing into more counter spells now, right? That negate from the sideboard that didn't exist in the main deck. But in the sideboard, he has access to that card. He drew into that Intergust as well. So now he is very well protected, but still, given infinite time, Luis Salvato will produce more threats than Luis Vargas can answer.
And that's a good way to look at it. You know, this is something that often comes up in older formats like Modern, right? How well you can play off the top of your deck. A deck like Jund looks to play off the top of its library with just raw power level. And when you're ripping cards like Omnath, ripping cards like the Genesis Ultimatum that you can see on the battlefield here, this is better for you in a long-term attrition-based game. It's going to be Uro, however, that comes down first for a card, gain 3 life, and it's going to stick around this time because, of course, it was escaped, but not for long, as Aethergust takes care of this Uro. That Genesis Ultimatum in hand, I don't think we're going to see Scott Vargas tap out of this negate anytime soon because he is living, of course, in under the threat of that Genesis Ultimatum. Uro?
Yeah. And Luis Vargas has a threat that he can play in future turns, right? He has that Uro that he can just probably play next turn. So he will never need to tap up for it. So, but I think we might just see... Oh, no, I guess not. Well, the negate is face up, so it's really awkward.
It was taken off of that that Narset. So I guess when you're in Salvato's position, you're just like, okay, do I burn this Genesis Ultimatum, trade my 7 mana against his 2, and just take my lumps? But not going to do it here. Maybe waiting for a bit of interaction of his own. I'm looking at the sideboard of Luis Salvato, and I can see that he also has copies of negate. So they could have an impact here.
Yeah, and maybe something like, Mystical Dispute, if he has that, that would be good. I don't think he does.
No, I can't see Mystical Dispute in Salvato's 75. He's playing Aethergust Negate as his principal interactive options here.
Yeah, so this is a spot where, well, if you hold that ultimatum in your hand, right, how is the game going to develop, right? Because... Well, Luis Vargas has Thoughtseize, for example, which we just saw him draw, right? And he has to keep up mana, which really isn't very much at this stage of the game, right? So when you are only drawing into 2 of your own negates, I think you just have to go for it. You know the negate is there, right? So, but you trade your ultimatum for the negate, and you hope to top deck another one or an Escape to the Wilds, right? Because if you top deck these cards later on, well, then it's still going to be a full turn before you can play the second one, right? So I think... he should have just gone for it. It wouldn't really have mattered, I don't think. But now the ultimatum is gone, and he didn't even get rid of the negate. Right?
Yeah, and this is the problem, right? Like, it's not necessarily an indictment on Salvato. You make these judgment calls when you're playing games of Magic, but that's certainly something to consider. The fact that when your opponent has you dead to rights with the counterspell, sometimes you've just got to play into it and hope that the top of your deck treats you kindly. Right now, that's certainly what's happening with Scott Vargas. The top of his deck is treating him very kindly indeed. Here's an Aethergust on the Uro. And yeah, I think Scott Vargas is just happy to have that happen. Eliminate off the top. He's got another Uro in hand, but now Hydroid Krasis can come down as well.
Yeah, or just second Uro. I mean, Luis Vargas is firmly in control here. As long as Luis Salvato doesn't top deck like several good cards in a row.
But even then, with the Eliminate, with Mythos, with Negate, Scott Vargas is in a good position to hustle and bustle with whatever Salvato's going to be able to conjure up.
And the Aethergust from Salvato are interesting because, well, Nisa is very important, right? I think it's the most important card, and Aethergust is very good versus that. But at the same time, you were playing an attrition matchup, right? And you are going to invariably find yourself in spots where it's a top deck war, right? You have 3 turns to draw something super impactful, and then that wins you the game, and you really cannot afford to draw a blank. And in these spots, Iter Ghost kind of is a blank, right? I guess in this part in particular, it wasn't, but
yeah, the conditionality of the card can be a real liability here. But now is an opportunity for Salvato with Scott Vargas tapped out, and draws a
and a pretty greedy play from Scott Vargas there, I think. That is about, I'm going to close out the game super quickly.
Yeah.
But he could have held onto that negate and just played a Krasis the following turn. Now he actually exposes himself to a potential top deck from Salvato, which, I mean, granted, he can still beat, right? He has 7 cards in hand and a very strong board. So there aren't many top decks that he won't beat. But yeah, really just a commanding win from Luis Vargas in that spot, I think, which is not how I traditionally believe that matchup should go. Obviously, you can never discount the top team's counter spells in release of that, right? But it should favor Luis Vargas.
It really was quite a clinic there from Luis Scott Vargas, who managed to weather the storm masterfully from Luis Salvato and starts off this tournament perfectly with a 1-0 win. He'll be very happy with that. Anyway, right now, my friends, we're going to go to a quick break and we'll be back at the desk with more details. And then, of course, after that, more Magic coming your way as well. So we do hope you'll stay with us. Stick around, everyone. We'll be back with more Magic from the 2020 season grand finals after this.